This is the BBC Live programme. Here is the news read by David Broomfield. The strike at the BMC components factory in Wales has now led to more than 12,000 workers being laid off. And Ford say their Halewood plant could be closed down by a local ban on overtime and a strike of delivery drivers. The Gemini 5 space flight has again been extended, with orders to the two astronauts to complete at least 47 orbits. A government minister has said that there should be a decision within 6 months about colour television in Britain. More than 11,000 British Motor Corporation workers at factories in Birmingham, South Wales and the Oxford area have now been made idle by the strike of 400 maintenance men at the group's Fisher & Ludlow factory at Llanelli. They include 1,200 at the factory itself, which has had to close down completely, and 3,000 at the Birmingham works of Fisher & Ludlow and Austin Cars. Pressed Steel at Swindon have laid off more than 1,000 men. It's the third time in 2 weeks that BMC's car production has been held up over a strike at a component factory, and our Midlands industrial correspondent says that there's now a general feeling in the industry that quite a big recession may lie ahead. The real worry is that dwindling sales at home may ultimately put up costs and jeopardize exports. Ford workers at Halewood, near Liverpool, have now started the ban on overtime they announced on Friday as a reply to the company's decision to begin a 4-day week in some departments. A Ford spokesman said later that if the maintenance men worked the ban, equipment could not be kept up to scratch, and this could lead to hold-ups in production throughout the whole plant. And with 300 men who deliver cars still on strike, storage places were rapidly filling up. The spokesman added, "We may have to cut down and possibly stop production." Leaders of 22 unions are to meet the management tomorrow to discuss the 4-day week. The Hoover factory at Merthyr Tydfil, which produces washing machines, is to close for 1 week in every 5 from next month. A statement from the management said this had been decided in answer to a request from the workers, who said they preferred it to the 4-day week that the company said last week they intended to introduce. It would have affected 2,500 out of a labour force of nearly 4,000. Hoover's blamed credit restrictions for the drop in sales. The 2 American astronauts have been told to stay in space for at least 47 orbits. That would be about a third of their planned 8-day mission. And at the Houston Control Center, flight directors are optimistic that they'll be able to keep the Gemini up until Sunday. It will, however, continue to be a day-to-day decision. Colonel Cooper and Commander Conrad are now in the 3rd day of the flight and are reported to be fit and well. After a 5-hour sleep, Conrad said he was as fresh as a daisy. It's his first space trip, Colonel Cooper's second. The spacecraft's program has been changed. Instead of trying to rendezvous with another satellite, it's now tracking an imaginary rocket under guidance from ground radar. American bombers have attacked a hydroelectric plant in North Vietnam for the 5th time in 3 days. In earlier raids, their objective was the dam. This time they destroyed the generators. No flooding was seen in the area, which is some 80 miles southwest of Hanoi. 87 raids were made in the north yesterday, one of the heaviest air defenses of the war. One strike was on targets only 31 miles from China. In the south, American planes have been called in to support South Vietnamese troops who are trying to clear communist terrorists from the Mekong Delta. There have been signs in the past week that the Viet Cong are trying to intensify their grip on the region, where most of the country's rice is grown. A forecast that some decision about the future of colour television in Britain must come within 6 months has been given by one of the Board of Trade Ministers, Mr. Roy Mason. Opening a television trade exhibition in London, he said the government were urgently studying the problem of which of the 3 rival methods of transmitting should be adopted. Mr. Mason said the industry should be given some assurance about an early start with colour television, otherwise Britain might not be able to maintain her advanced position in this field. The government would announce its decision just as soon as possible. The BBC is to drop its new television series 199 Park Lane at the end of September. The twice-weekly show has now run 6 episodes. A spokesman emphasized that there had been no complaints about the serial. He said it didn't seem to be achieving the sort of audience the BBC had hoped for. 199 Park Lane will be replaced by 2 serials, each running twice a week. One will be about a small factory which moves from London to East Anglia, and the other will deal with a professional football club, probably in a Midland setting. A 27-year-old South London man, Alan Michael Houchin, has made a 2-minute appearance at Margate Magistrates Court, charged with the murder of 16-year-old Shona Berry, whose body was found yesterday morning in a park in Margate. Houchin was remanded in custody until Wednesday week. 50 people from a German cargo ship which went aground in Fog off Orkney early today are to be flown to London tomorrow in a chartered BEA airliner. They lost all their belongings when they abandoned the ship, which capsized a few hours later and sank. More than 200 Canadian and American tourists who'd been on a month's holiday in Europe and were stranded at Gatwick Airport over the weekend flew home today. Half of them returned in the Canadian airliner that had been impounded for a time at Gatwick as security for an alleged debt of £12,000. They had an extra 2 days holiday at a Brighton hotel. The other 100 were delayed 11 hours because their plane had arrived late and had to have its seating rearranged so as to accommodate them all. An 18-year-old girl on the staff of the telephone exchange at Chippenham in Wiltshire has been suspended on full pay while a post office inquiry is held into alleged telephone tapping. She and another girl were reported in the newspaper to have said that calls had been tapped, including some made by the royal family while staying at Badminton. The other girl has taken another job. A man who was Prime Minister of Egypt 7 times, Mustafa el-Nahas, has died in Alexandria at the age of 89. Nahas Pasha, as he was known under the monarchy, was for many years leader of the nationalist party, the Wafd. He signed the Anglo-Egyptian Treaty in 1936 and abrogated it 15 years later. He led the Wafd until 1952, when General Naguib forced his resignation. London Midland Region of British Railways took a look forward today to the time when London's commuter service stretches as far as Birmingham. By next January, with all trains to Euston electric, 50 trains will be operating fast services to Harrow, Watford, and stations beyond as far as Northampton and Rugby. Later, the services will extend to Coventry and eventually, within 2 years, to Birmingham. British United Airways and the state-owned airline BEA have put in for a license to fly passengers to Leningrad. Each opposed the other, and BOAC also objected to the application by BUA. For British European Airways, it was stated that a previous license for Leningrad flights had been withdrawn in 1963. But, a spokesman said, the political situation was easing and the economics of the operation had changed.